there are plenty of great lawyers out there who simply just don't know about the issue. And I can't fault a lawyer because I was that lawyer before it was on my radar. And every lawyer is that lawyer until it's on their radar. But why I'm crying tears in the valley is because I know it's not on their radar. And I know that Sam Bankman-Fried is going to get convicted. And I know there are going to be all kinds of assumptions made about his state of mind and his morals compass and his value system and his culpability. And they're all going to be wrong because nobody considered autism.
Over 1 million Americans face sentencing every year, and it will be the most important day of their lives. But we don't fully understand the system, how broken it is, and what we can do to make it better. I'm Doug Passon. I'm a 25-year criminal defense lawyer and a sentencing expert. My goal is to bring more awareness, more fairness, and more humanity to the sentencing process. So, are you ready? Then let's get set for sentencing.
Hey, everybody. Doug Passon coming to you from Scottsdale, Arizona, with my good friend, colleague, guidelines guru, sentencing stats expert, Mark Allenbaugh, today to talk about the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried. It started this past week. It's ongoing, and we have much to discuss. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Doing well, Doug. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Great.
And one of the reasons I'm doing great is because tonight, on this fine Sunday, we have another pseudo sponsor, tequila pseudo sponsor. Tonight is Lágrimas del Valle. This is a lovely, I just found this bottle last night at Trevor's Liquors here in Arizona, a fabulous liquor store. I've been looking for this bottle for quite some time because I've only had the Blanco and I found the Reposado. It's a 90 rated tequila on Tequila Matchmaker, my favorite website / app. So I thought, we always try to make these thematic, so I thought I was going to find a way to theme this into tonight's podcast episode, no matter what, because I've been waiting desperately to open this bottle. Really, you know what lágrimas means, Ryan?
Lágrimas.
Lágrimas.
Lo siento, hablo un poquito español.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't speak a lot of Spanish either, but it's tears. Tears of the Valley. And this is why it's relevant, because I'm thinking about Sam Bankman-Fried and I'm on the verge of tears, and I'm here in the valley of the sun, drinking Lágrimas del Valle, because here's why I am seriously sad. I'm so bummed. If you've been listening to this podcast, maybe you've heard episode 46, 2 parts with Mark Mahoney, autism expert. Maybe you've heard episode 5. That's going back. We're at episode 73 now. This is. And
wow.
But I've been talking about autism all the way through this journey that we've been on Set for Sentencing, because we work on these cases all over the country. Something like 1 in 50 people have autism. We've missed this all throughout our career. I'm guilty of it too. And I see these cases all the time now in criminal context where a client has autism, a lawyer doesn't know it. Sometimes the client doesn't know because they haven't been diagnosed yet.
Right.
But more importantly, we don't in the law understand what it is and why it matters. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist. Fine, I'm doing my little armchair amateur diagnoses. Okay, I have a lot of experience on the subject in my professional and my personal life. With a son on the autism spectrum. So, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look at all the Sam Bankman-Fried's press. Look at the 60 Minutes thing last week.
Right.
The dude is on the spectrum. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was trying to search to see if he's ever been diagnosed or whatever. And there's some suggestion of it on the internet, but who knows what's on the internet. So I'm just going to go from the premise, the foundational premise. Yeah.
Yeah, what was that? As I mentioned before we started the podcast, Michael Lewis's new book that I just got, Going Infinite. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a great read. I've read all of his books. He's a wonderful author and stuff. I don't know, it keeps disappearing there.
Yeah, because
but at any rate, there is a suggestion, as some book reviewers have noted, that he doesn't come right out and say that Sam Bankman-Fried has autism, but he sure suggests it.
Yeah,
there's some suggestion there.
Yeah,
so all the telltale signs, seem to be there, and hopefully his counsel picks up on it and uses that.
Yeah,
to assist him.
Well, and so we've talked a little bit about Sam Bankman-Fried in the past, but it was in the context of pretrial detention.
Yeah,
that was
right.
episode 66, called Straight to Sentencing. What we did is we compared the fact that he got revoked and stuck in jail pretrial
Right.
for allegedly obstructing witnesses, and we did a side by side with the former president, who seems to be able to do anything he wants, and not get revoked. But anyway, so Sam Bankman-Fried's going to trial, and I was very curious to know, just, okay, is this going to come up in trial at all, that he has autism? And so I looked at the docket. I scoured everything I can to see if there was, maybe they're going to call an expert or something. And the question is, well, what would you need an expert for in trial to talk about autism? And the answer is for a lot of reasons.
Right.
But first and foremost, if you look at the way Sam Bankman-Fried is described in the press and on the TikToks and by the people that know him and everything else, it's really ugly descriptors. He's a freak. He's a weirdo, this, that, and the other thing. So he's going to be sitting in a courtroom with 12 jurors who are judging his every move and reading his body language and looking for signs about whether he's really the villain that has been portrayed in the media, whether he looks guilty, whether he shows appropriate remorse or emotion when these victims are going to take the stand and talk about how they were defrauded out of millions of dollars. Is he going to be paying attention? Is he going to look like he doesn't care? Is he going to be not making eye contact? Which, in neurotypical world, if you can't make eye contact with somebody, you're hiding something. You're guilty of something. You're suspect. And there are all these mannerisms and in neurodiversity that need to be explained to the fact finders, to say, whatever you're seeing here, I know you want to look at him, you want to judge him, but here's what you're seeing, and here's why you're seeing it, and you can't read into that. That's first and foremost. A good lawyer who has a client on the autism spectrum would be aware of that. And I guess I should not say a good lawyer, because there are plenty of great lawyers out there who simply just don't know about the issue. And I can't fault a lawyer, because I was that lawyer before it was on my radar. And every lawyer is that lawyer until it's on their radar. But why I'm crying tears in the valley is because I know it's not on their radar. And I know that Sam Bankman-Fried is going to get convicted. And I know there are going to be all kinds of assumptions made about his state of mind and his morals compass and his value system and his culpability. And they're all going to be wrong, because nobody considered autism. And that's breaking my heart.
Yeah.
And I will say this, because I know you're going to share screen. We're going to talk about what kind of sentences he's facing and statistics and all that great stuff, that magic that you do. But I will say this, like I said, I was looking for it. Are they going to thing? And I'll share my screen, because this is the only thing that I found, and it's not autism, by the way, but this just goes to show you how much trouble I think Sam Bankman-Fried is going to be in at trial here. And this is his voir dire that I pulled, proposed voir dire questions. And so people who don't maybe follow this, this is when you're picking a juror, you want to ask them questions to know if they can be fair and if they'd be good jurors. And sometimes you can file something in advance to get them these questions asked to the jury. And so standard stuff, pretrial publicity. Have you seen anything about this case? Have you heard about this case? And do you know about crypto? Do you know about effective altruism, political donations? And here we go. This is the only thing that even suggests any neurodiversity issues here. And it's about what? ADHD.
Yeah.
It says, so this is what they want to tell the jury. The defendant in this case has ADHD, which might affect things like his physical behavior, body language, or eye contact. So it's a good start, but please raise your hand if you have never had any personal or professional experience with ADHD. If you've never had any personal or professional experience with ADHD, do you have any opinion about the fact that the defendant has ADHD? If so, what is your opinion? Could you completely ignore that if you were a jury in this case? So this is so surface level. I mean, what do you think that's going to accomplish at the end of the day? Nothing.
Well, unfortunately, it might end up weeding out people who have an understanding for ADHD. The way I'm reading, the way this question is posed, I mean, it seems to be like, could you completely ignore your opinion about ADHD if you were
right?
Well, if I was defense counsel, I wouldn't want them to ignore that if they have an understanding.
Exactly.
And the fact that there's, nothing in here about autism, but effective altruism. And effective altruism, that's obviously a tip that's going to play part of the defense, but I don't think it's going to play very well as opposed to
just so people
understand.
If you haven't been paying attention to Sam Bankman-Fried, I guess we should just give you the 101. So he was a 20-something math crypto genius, worked on Wall Street, and he started a crypto exchange, and he had other companies, and he funneled money from one place to the other. And then there was essentially like a run on the money, and everybody wanted to take their money back, and he didn't have it covered. And so he took money from company A to cover company B to the tune of like $8 billion. And so now he's a fraudster. He's a villain. And this effective altruism stuff is, these young kids essentially were saying, we're not really here amassing wealth because we want the finer things and because we're greedy. We're doing it to support causes to help the world and heal the world. So they're spending gajillions of dollars on political things and charitable things and all this stuff. And that's called effective altruism, or EA. And so in this juror questionnaire, they want to know about, have you heard of effective altruism? Have you, is that going to make it hard for you to be fair and impartial juror? So it is really kind of sad. It's really, really sad. And that is why I'm crying tears of the valley. Now, let me keep going with this, because the other major reason why autism probably should be central, again, I'm armchair quarterback, central to the defense, is because of intent, of state of mind.
Right. And not just intent, but, also culpability for when he is convicted. I think that's going to play absolutely a central role.
I was going there. Absolutely.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. But I'm just saying, first trial, right? This should be everywhere, all over trial. And because everyone's saying, well, this is the problem with autism. People, first of all, do not understand high functioning autism. I won't go through it, the whole thing. Go to the other podcast episodes, because there are smarter people than I that can explain it to you better. But I know this to be sure. One thing is this so-called high functioning autism. So if you're a brilliant genius who can graduate, Stanford, work on Wall Street, start multi-billion-dollar corporations, then don't come to me and say your autism prevented you from understanding this or that, or acting in this way or acting in that way. That's bullshit. I don't believe it, because people think if you're a genius in one area, you must therefore be competent genius in all areas. And that is the giant misnomer of so-called high functioning autism. The truth is, you can be super high functioning in math or cryptocurrency, or all the things that, those subtle nuances that neurodiverse people can grab a hold of a lot easier sometimes, and then be totally blind when it comes to basic shit.
Yeah.
Like, Do you think it's okay that to play a video game in the middle of a high power Zoom meeting? Because
Right.
that's what he was doing. No, socially not acceptable. Eye contact, all this other stuff. So you've got all these things that go to his culpability and his state of mind, because everybody's going to assume he knew exactly what he was doing, and then he was a fraudster and he was a villain and he was this and that. No, not true. I don't think
Yes.
so. I
Yeah.
do not think so. And so it's, and even you were saying about the Michael Lewis book.
Right.
He said, if I remember, you say, I haven't read the book yet. You're reading it. I want to read it. It was a combination of neurodiversity, extreme youth, and sleep disorder that
Right.
landed him in this situation.
Right. Yeah,
So,
that's according to Michael Lewis. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of this perfect storm of, and it's all interrelated, by the way.
Mhm.
And he may have ADHD, but that may be also that may be autism and ADHD, or sometimes it really just is mistaken. A lot of times there's misdiagnosis because the symptoms are very similar. And a lot of times people have ADHD are misdiagnosed with autism. And then he's a young dude. He's a young dude. And
Right.
so just because he's really good at one thing, crypto, investments, whatever, he could suck at all the rest of the things about running a business, and not only suck at it, but not care about it.
Right.
Because when you're on the spectrum, you are hyper focused on what you're interested in. That's why some folks on the spectrum can name every World War II submarine, because that's what their intense area of interest is in. And it's to the exclusion of all the other stuff. And people need to understand that, and they're not going to. He's going to be convicted. And we're going to talk to you in a second about what he's looking at if he is convicted. But I will just say, here are some clues that I found when I was doing my research. He says, in a lot of this is a quote, "My feelings are fake. My facial reactions are fake. I don't feel happiness. What's the point in dating someone who you physically can't make happy?" So that my feelings are fake.
Lewis discusses that in the book. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. When he worked at the high frequency trading firm Jane Street Capital, some executives were, quote, disturbed by Sam's indifference to other people's feelings. That was from the Lewis book too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a classic ASD, man. And it's not because they're bad people. It's not because they're indifferent to it. It's because they can't always read other people's feelings. That is called theory of mind. You can't see things from the other person's perspective to understand how something you may say or do may look douchey AF. Like it just may look so bad. It's like when the little brother comes to the big brother, so interested to show him something, and the big brother, who's on the spectrum, very honestly says, "I really don't care." Because he really doesn't care, and he doesn't understand how that's going to wreck his little brother who wants his big brother to be interested in him, right?
Just one thing on that, Doug, too. What this reminds me of, this isn't this phenomenon of people being, experts in one particular area and just, if you will, not very competent in others when you think that they would go hand in hand. This isn't something that's peculiar to those with autism. I think we see this in normal life, or in regular life, or neurotypical life, I guess would be the proper terminology. An example I'm thinking of is coaching. So just because somebody is really good at being a basketball star like Magic Johnson doesn't mean that that's automatically going to translate into being an excellent coach. Yeah. Magic Johnson's a perfect example. He was an awful coach, great player, awful coach. Now we get to see like Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders, probably one of the best athletes in history, and seemed to have a lot of hype, Coach Prime, at the beginning. But now, we're starting to see that it may not translate. Buffalo is,
wait a minute,
isn't living up to its team. So
you said Coach Prime. This is the second time you've mentioned Coach Prime, but this time you do it about Deion Sanders. So I don't know what Coach Prime. I don't know what that means.
Coach Prime is Deion Sanders.
I didn't know that.
Oh,
why do they call? Why is
it prime time? That's what he was known as back in the day. He was prime time. Yeah, okay. So that's why they call him Coach Prime.
See, that's my That's my reverse
You
autism.
see,
I guess I have no
I'm
zero
good
fucks to give about sports.
I'm good at numbers. I'm pretty good at cooking. Yeah, I'm good at college football, but I suck at everything else.
Uh-huh. Well, you know what? Honestly, like I don't want to make light of this, but like I said, 1 in 50 or so people are probably on the spectrum. I've worked with some experts that have opined that I may be on the spectrum. My wife likes to tease me about how obsessive I get over things like tequilas and whatever.
Right.
But you may. I don't want to diagnose you either, but you sure are into those stats, man.
Yeah.
In those charts.
I like the numbers.
You really do. But I'm not making light of this situation, but we just have so much to learn about this. So as a public, as a society as a whole. And the really sad part is I see it time and time again. People don't prosecutors don't get it, judges don't get it. And the punishments that are meted out because they totally misunderstand who this person is in their bones. It's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. And so we can keep going with, okay, so autism is mitigation at sentencing about why they're less culpable than a neurotypical. And it's also deeply mitigating when you talk about telling the story of prison at sentencing.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this in a lot of other episodes, and I want you to go back and Maureen Baird's episode too. We mention it. It's all over that because there's sensitivity to sounds, to smells, to foods, to textures, to the clothing. There's social interaction is the worst. It's the hardest thing. There's 2 sets of rules inside of the facility: the inmate rules and the institutional rules. And autism folks are generally rule bound people. That's how they order their lives, by creating routine and structure and rule following. And that is fucking hard to do when you're incarcerated. And behaviors get misunderstood by guards, and it becomes a discipline problem. Behaviors become annoying to inmates, and then it becomes a violence problem because if you're flapping your arms or, whatever, it's just to put an autistic person in prison. I think it was Simon Baron Cohen, the autism expert, is like taking a person in a wheelchair and throwing them into a swimming pool. They're going to drown.
No.
So anyway, that is why I'm crying tears in the valley. And I must say, this is helping me because this is very, very delicious. This podcast brought to you by Lagrimas del Valle. So that is, I could talk on and on about that. There's another problem here completely unrelated to autism, and I won't go deeply into it, but I'm seeing this. I've handled a couple crypto cases, and people don't understand that either. And
I want to talk about that.
Okay, good.
I got a lot of points on crypto, and especially with respect to sentencing. But I think the big takeaway I hope that people get out of this podcast is that how unique, and maybe that it's not going to be unique going forward, but these high profile, super high loss cases, how different they can be. I think when the press gets a hold of these cases, there is a tendency just to lump these individuals into kind of the same pot, where it's just ego and greed that gets started. And that may have explained some folks in the past, like Bernie Madoff. I think Bernie Madoff was a very good example of ego and greed. Started getting greedy, and then his ego wouldn't let him stop. And it wasn't so much, it wouldn't let him stop because he wanted to get more and more greedy. It was his embarrassment, his professional embarrassment, why he couldn't stop. He had to keep hiding it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's what happened here, at least initially. I think it did happen a little bit to Sam, but it wasn't ego that was driving him when you try to hide everything. Frankly, his altruistic nature. He was trying to minimize the harm that all of the fallout from the collapse was going to cause to his investors and stuff like that. But anyway, I'm kind of. Well,
no, you're right, because listen, we do a ton of white collar cases, and sometimes white collar offenders are like borderline sociopaths. Like they know they're doing wrong. They want the money. It's greed, and they do not care who gets hurt in the process, and they're master manipulators. They're amazing at manipulation. Autistic folks are just the opposite. They don't realize how wrong things are going until it's too late, and they're not
right.
They're not,
and that's a good point, and that's a good point too, because I haven't seen anybody describe Sam Bankman-Fried as charismatic yet, but that's very often in the lower level frauds. And by lower level frauds, I mean your Ponzi schemes of just tens of millions
taken
of dollars
in by these people.
Yeah, you get that. Those guys tend to be a lot more manipulative and charismatic. Where you're taken in by their golden tongue. Yeah. And here it was more of Sam Bankman-Fried's, I think, golden mind, in that he was a mystery to people. And so there's something else. But anyway, we could talk about that down the road. But the point simply is that this is a very, very interesting case, because we're seeing, I think, and we are going to start seeing more cases like this, where you have these young, hyper intelligent kids just get in real quickly, way above their heads. But I don't think that they're doing it necessarily on purpose. It's just others want to throw money at them because they see the next bit, just like Elizabeth Holmes. And we've talked about her, and you think that she may have been on the spectrum too, maybe on the spectrum.
I'm gonna have to put that episode in the show notes too. Yeah, I did my armchair diagnosis on her too, for sure. Yeah. So, and people want it. It's exciting.
People want Google. They want Mark Zuckerberg. They want to get on the next big thing here. So when they see these savants show up, these young savants, that they're willing to risk. But I think, anyway, I'm jumping ahead in my analysis, but I think that can serve as a great mitigation tool for people like Sam Bankman-Fried.
You would hope, you would think, and you would hope, and people need to pay attention. But this is the sad part. He's almost certainly headed for conviction. So what's he looking at? Okay,
so first, let me just do a share my screen here.
While you do that, I will take a break to talk about Lágrimas del Valle, reposado, hecho en Mexico. This is the El Chiqueño edition. Rancho Único, which means single estate, basically. Would you like to hear a little tidbit about Lágrimas? This is the producer of this is very concerned with terroir. He came from the wine industry, and if you know, I don't know a ton about wine, but I know that this concept of the earth that the grapes are grown can impact the flavor of the wine. And so they're very focused on, so they get these agave plants from different ranches, and they don't call them, a lot of times in tequila, they call them single estate, but he doesn't want to call them estate because it's really a wine term. So he calls them Rancho Único. So from a ranch, a single ranch, but they pick the agave because of the soil that it's been, and agave grows for 8 years to maturity. So it's just, that's what kind of makes tequila so interesting. It's not like a every year harvest. It's marinating in that terroir for a long ass time. Anyway, that's probably my autism kicking in. So let's go back to
I got your memo on wearing the black T-shirt. I wish I got your memo on the tequila, so I could have shared. But I just have my Diet Coke.
Okay, you need to take a break. I can press pause. Okay, all right. So you've got the superseding indictment up for those of you tuning in on the YouTubes.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the reason why I just wanted to show the indictment is that there isn't a indictment. There have now been 6 superseding indictments, which is something very rare.
I mean, they dismissed some charges too, I think. The campaign finance charges, they dismissed.
Yeah, I think there was some stuff. But anyway, the point is that this is, it might be reducing in some ways the case, but it's growing in a lot others. Yeah. So this is just, it's very complicated. As a matter of fact, I don't recall ever seeing a case with 6 superseding indictments. I'm sure there are some, but not very many. I mean, seeing 1 superseding indictment is rather common. 2, a bit more uncommon. And once you get after 2 superseding indictments, it's pretty rare. 6 is just it is crazy. So,
by the way, I will tell you that in my experience, superseding indictments are not rare, but 6 totally crazy. But to me, that suggests either that they kind of jumped in quickly to indict him based on a limited sliver of crimes that they thought they could prove and get an indictment. And then as they go through the gajillion pages of subpoenas and discovery and witness interviews, they can add more charges.
Exactly.
And or if the client says, screw you, I'm not pleading guilty to anything, I'm going to trial. And they say, okay, if you want to do that, we're going to bring this, and this. And you can go to trial on 12 counts instead of 3 then if you want. So who knows?
So, but this is actually a teaching moment here just on the superseding indictments. Superseding indictments for sentencing purposes really aren't that much of a big deal if you're not looking at a mandatory minimum.
Yeah, I know.
So
why?
Really, I'm sorry?
Tell us why.
Okay, so with superseding indictments for sentencing purposes, those counts, all those different counts tend to what's called group together. In other words, they're all treated as one. So if Sam Bankman Fried, he might have started out with 1 count of wire fraud, which carries a 20-year stat max. And now let's say they added in, 5 more counts of wire fraud. All those counts of wire fraud are going to be treated as one offense for purposes of sentencing. He's not going to get those sentences stacked one on top of each other consecutively.
Yeah.
So the only thing it does in theory is increase his top end exposure and in terms of what the statutory maximum is.
Yeah.
But as you and I know, and even the press nowadays reports on this correctly, rarely is the stat max ever given.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I don't recall the last time a stat max sentence was given in a mega high loss case like this, except Bernie Madoff. He got 150 years, which was the stat max that he was.
Yeah, a very symbolic sentence because he was in his 70s when it happened.
Right, right. And then he ended up dying in prison anyway, which would have been, even if he got 10 years, he didn't even last 10 years in prison. So we're going to get to that. I did do a life expectancy analysis for SBF here, even though he's very young, it still matters for sentencing in this case. So one thing I just wanted to point out too, this was on page 7 of the indictment, which I thought was really interesting. And it's more interesting for trial purposes, I think, but it can come in for purposes of sentencing too, in terms of culpability, is that there's an allegation here that FTX or that Sam Bankman Fried, SBF, was fudging the financial statements. And the reason why I find that interesting is that's all about Trump. Trump's currently on trial for fraud, civil fraud in New York. And that's one of the allegations there. It's actually the main allegation is that he and his sons were fudging the financial statements and then passing them off to their auditors, so the auditors can make some type of audit statements for investors or for banks. And so Trump's trying to say, well, we put all these disclaimers in these financial statements and you shouldn't have relied on them as if that was a ticket for fraud. But at any rate, so I just thought that was a little interesting. But anyway, let's get to the point. The point is, speaking of stat maxes and Bernie Madoff and all this stuff, what I'm showing here are the 7 counts that he's currently in the 6th superseding indictment. This is what he's currently looking at. And this is what he's gone to trial on, I should say. So he has 4 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of securities fraud, 1 count of commodities fraud, and 1 count of money laundering. And all those add up to a total of 110 years. And most likely, I think these are going to be sentenced under the fraud guideline 2B 1.1. Sometimes you see it where there's 1 money laundering count. The money laundering count will be the primary one, but for technical reasons, I think it's going to be the fraud. We don't have to bore the audience with this, but I think it's going to be the fraud guideline. In any rate, it's going to play some role in there. And as we're going to see, it really doesn't matter because however this is carved up, because the loss amount is going to be so
loss
high.
Always drives the guideline.
Yeah, the loss always drives it.
This is billions and billions. This is $8 billion. So
yeah,
do the guidelines even go up to
No,
that I don't know.
no, they don't. They don't even go up to $1 billion. Basically, anything over like 600 million is you get a plus 30. So let's look at the guidelines. Speaking of that, so here's how I calculate his guideline range. Yeah,
let's just say it right now. It's going to be life. I know.
Yeah. Well. So here's what's interesting, though. None of the counts of conviction carry a life term.
Yeah.
But he will be maxed out under the guidelines. He will have an offense level 43. But I do want to go through this real quick. But anyway, he will have an offense level 43, and that does call for life. So there's this weird thing that really isn't settled in the law. And this is something that I hope that Bankman Fried's lawyers bring up at sentencing. And it's something that Judge Denny Chen, who was Bernie Madoff's judge, he brought this up during Madoff's sentencing when the guidelines called for life. What people tend to, or what courts tend to do, is just look at whatever the total statutory maximum is and impose that as the sentence, or consider that as the guideline sentence. So in this case, it's 110 years.
Right.
That's the total stat max. And so that's it, with an offense level 43. Because it calls for life, none of the statutes of conviction have a life sentence. So for whatever reason, this is more like federal common law, if you will, because the guidelines do not expressly call for this. But just over the years, unquestioningly, courts have been just, in cases like this, just stacking everything up and giving these absurdly high sentences, or finding that's what the guidelines call for. And there's nothing in the guidelines that call for this. Wow. And so I think it's a wrong way of looking at it. We could talk about that down the road once we get to sentencing here. But I just hope his attorneys, if they're watching this, or anybody associated with the firms are watching this, keep in mind that the 110 years is not called for by the guidelines, even though the government's going to default for it and think that that's what the sentence is. So just looking at, so how is the guidelines going to calculate? How are they going to be calculated for those that aren't watching this on video? So we're going to start at a base offense level of 7, because at least one of the counts of conviction carries a 20-year stat max. So that's what you do. Then losses over 550 million. I misspoke earlier. 550 million is the highest that the loss table goes under the fraud guideline. Yeah. And so you get a 30, plus 30.
30 level.
Yeah. And there's an argument, by the way, for an upward departure, because the loss is so much higher than even 550 million.
As if 30 levels wasn't going to be enough.
Right, exactly. So 30 levels.
The table only goes up to 43, and we're already at 37. But
we're at 37.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, there's more than 10 victims. So more than 10 victims is a plus 2. Now, just on that note, a few years ago, the commission, when they kind of rearranged or amended this provision in the fraud guideline regarding the number of victims, they added another upward adjustment if any of the victims suffered serious or substantial financial hardship. I'm going to assume here none did. Most of these investors, in crypto, most people are not putting their 401ks or mortgaging their house to invest in crypto. It's usually either professional investors or those with some expendable income. I haven't heard of anybody like we did in Madoff. Madoff was different. People were putting their life savings, into
something that is supposed to be relatively stable, predictable, long history. I don't have a lot of sympathy for someone who wants to strike it rich in cryptocurrency.
Exactly. And we're going to get to that. That's a good point. Yes. Okay. And we're going to get to that. I think that's a huge mitigating factor here. Yeah. Huge.
You knew the risk. You took the risk.
Right.
Sorry, but go ahead.
So I know judges tend to hate the blaming the victim, and lawyers tend to be remiss or reluctant, if you will, to raise that. But I think in these high level cases, you have to. These high loss cases, especially involving cryptocurrency, because everybody realizes it's so speculative, inherently speculative and flawed. So they're coming into it knowing that there's a high chance they're going to lose money, but yet it's a get rich quick scheme. And so, anyway, so there's definitely sophisticated means here. So he's going to get another plus 2. So now we're up to 40 See, 37 plus 4, we're at 41 now, and 43 is the highest. So we're more than $1 million in gross receipts derived from a financial institution. Yes, there were many financial institutions, which I was surprised to see, that had invested with FTX or with that brokerage, if you will. So he's going to get another +2 there. And now we're at 43. But wait, there's more. The Sam Bankman-Fried also would qualify as an investment advisor. This is a relatively new enhancement under the fraud guideline from, I think, within the last 10 years. He's going to get a +4 for that because he was advising on that folks should invest in these securities, and FTX actually was offering its own security too, its very own security to invest in, the FTT. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, there's the leadership role, and so he's going to get a +4 for that because he was definitely the leader of this whole organization. I think there's a strong argument he will also get the abuse of trust because he was acting as an investment advisor and had a fiduciary relationship to those that he was investing their money in and was supposed to keep it safe and all that stuff. So that's another +2. Obstruction of justice, he's going to get another +2 for obstruction of justice. And I'm basing that on the facts that resulted in Judge Kaplan, his judge in this case, remanding him. Because as we know, he was out on bail. But then he was speaking to a New York Times reporter and sharing all this private information about Caroline Ellison, his former girlfriend.
But can I tell you, because I want to speak to that for a second, because I listened to the Daily, the New York Times podcast, and that reporter was doing an episode on the trial. And it was the same reporter who SBF disclosed all this information to. And the first thing I would say is this reporter had seemingly no remorse or had no hesitation or reservations about the fact that he was responsible for letting Sam Bankman-Fried wallow in MCC, like a terrible prison, for just because he was doing a story, and SBF had these writings of Carolyn Ellison, who pled guilty early on, and she's going to testify against him. So he really opportunistic is an understatement for that guy. He had no understanding of how badly he fucked over SBF to get a good story. And that made me kind of sad and sick in a way. But the other thing was he was trying, if you look at some of the stuff that he was giving over to the reporter, they were sort of the inner workings of this woman, Carolyn Ellison's mind, and her insecurities at being a 20-something insecure, also, I guarantee you, on the spectrum, neurodiverse person who's in charge of this billion-dollar corporation and constantly questioning herself, her abilities, her leadership, her relationship with SBF, her everything. And she's not functioning in the way that a neurotypical person is functioning. And I believe in my heart of hearts, SBF was trying to explain to this reporter, this whole thing is more than meets the eye. And here's what you need to understand about this case. He gets a jail cell made up for him as a payback for trying to tell his story in the public eye. Do you think he was trying to intimidate her or scare her out of testifying, manipulate her, obstruct justice? Fuck no. I guarantee you that was the furthest thing from his mind when he did that, because that's not how his brain works. Right. And now he's sitting in a jail cell as a result of it. And he's going to get 2 levels for obstruction of justice. Yeah. That pisses me off.
So but in all fairness, I get that. I don't think, let me just rephrase this. There's a lot of other conduct that this obstruction can be based on, other conduct that is clearly obstructive, where as FTX was imploding, he was directing, according to the indictment, he was directing other employees to lie to investors, to lie to investigators. Yeah. Yeah. But I know the reason why I noted the Ellison thing is because that's what Judge Kaplan cited.
Yes.
As a reason. But also in Judge Kaplan's defense, I think this was also the final straw.
Yes. He had given him some.
Yeah, he had given him a lot of leeway. And, Sam Bankman Fried, there were some credibility issues with him too, where he said he had to get on a VPN to watch to watch a football game.
But you know what? That's a perfect example. Yes, it's possible that he's just a manipulative liar. And he's using a VPN to do nefarious things on the internet and not be discovered. Or he is a rule follower and he is a genius when it comes to computers. And in his brain, you don't go online without a VPN because that is the safest, most protected way to be on the internet. And that is my rule. That is my obsession. And I don't see anything wrong with being on a VPN. And I'm just watching a game. And what's the harm in watching a game on a VPN? Not understanding that anybody's going to look at that and say, oh, you're a manipulative liar. You're trying to do something shady. He's not even thinking about it. I mean, who knows?
You're right.
And then the other thing was, what did he do? There was one other thing that they were mad at him about. It was the VPN and something.
Well, he reached out. I think he reached out to his former general counsel
and said, "Let's talk or get on the same page or something."
Exactly. And that's. I'm with you, Doug, but even at that one, I think was just that for me, that would have been a bridge too far. I would have remanded him at that,
Yes.
So
I know. But you have to understand the concept of perseveration.
Yeah.
When you perseverate, when you fixate, when you hyper focus, which is the central component of autism, at a certain point, you really can't help yourself.
Yeah,
you really can't.
Right.
And maybe it was wrong. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. But that's how the autistic brain works. You get hyper focused on something.
Right. So we're at an offense level 55. And it only goes up to 43. So even if he doesn't get the obstruction, he's still really screwed. The last thing I'll note here, though, he is eligible. I think he is eligible for the 0 point offender.
Zippo, baby.
Because he doesn't have any prior criminal history, at least that I'm aware of, and it hasn't been reported. So he's eligible for the Zippo, and I'm going to give him the Zippo, even though he's getting the 4-level enhancement. We just did a podcast.
Right. I was going to say this is a good moment to plug because we actually just recorded it yesterday, but it's going to drop tomorrow. So it's going to be before this one. So episode 72, I think, whatever, is called Imperfect 10.
Imperfect 10, yes.
And which is about Criterion 10, which says people think if you get the leader organizer enhancement, you can't get the Zippo. And we say, we think you can. So you're giving him, he's going to get leadership role enhancement. You've given him a 4+ plus 4, but you're also saying, he's going to get 2 off for the Zippo.
Yeah, he's going to get 2 off for the Zippo. And even if he doesn't, that's the point. It really doesn't matter because he's already above 43.
Yeah.
So whenever in the rare case, and this is rare, in the rare case where a defendant's total offense level is above 43, then the guidelines say, well, just treat it as a 43. We're going to cut it back to a 43.
Yeah.
So his total offense level will be 43, which, as I said before, means life. And the way a lot of courts wrongly, I believe, have interpreted that is that means that the guidelines call for the statutory maximum.
And it's the call for stacking every count.
It does.
20 and 20 and 20 and 5 and 10 and
stack everything. So treat everything as consecutive. So remember what I said earlier, and this is why I think courts are wrong for doing this. It completely is inconsistent with the grouping rules because the whole grouping is to prevent stacking and is to prevent all of that in the consecutive sentencing.
All right. So I know you're going to.
So anyway, there's an argument for that.
I know you're going to give us a small, tiny ray of hope because even though if and heaven forbid when he loses at trial, his guidelines are going to come out to about 110 years. We know that even after trial and conviction, the guidelines are more often than not followed. So I'm sure you've done some stats.
Yes,
to
I have.
give us maybe a
Yes, yes, of
ballpark?
course. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I have Sam Bankman-Fried's whole sentencing argument ready. We're going to go through it. We're going to go through it in about 10 minutes here.
Okay.
And I'm going to save this.
my
I'm going to
God.
save his life. I'm going to save his life.
Okay. So what's next?
Okay, so what's next actually is the fine, and this is something we've never spoke about, and we probably should have a podcast sometime in the future on corporate sentencing, stuff. But here, he's definitely going to get a fine as well. And there is like a fine guideline with fine ranges, and for him, because he's out of 43, the fine ranges from $50,000 to $500,000. But there's also a statutory provision that says that a court can ignore that and impose a fine up to twice the amount gained. And so I'm assuming Bankman Fried may have set aside some money, and there's some chit chat that he may have been funneling some of that money to his parents, and as a way to disgorge that money. The court here, I think, is going to probably impose a very substantial fine. I would not be surprised if the court imposed $1 million or more, north of $1 million to disgorge him from that. And of course, there's going to be restitution and all that.
Which I assume, because he's going to be owing $8 billion in restitution, that the court may find he doesn't have the ability to pay a fine and not give him a fine. So let's put a little friendly wager on it. I say no fine. I say the judge is going to go, I think I'll bet you a bottle of that
tequila. I bet you a bottle of that tequila that not only will there be a fine, but it'll be at least $1 million.
All right, good. And for the record, I still owe you a bottle of tequila for a favor you did me. And guess what? This is what all your listeners need to know. I tried multiple companies to ship you a bottle, and Ohio, because of their stupid ass alcohol,
it's a different country laws,
here. None of those people will ship to Ohio. So I either have to commit, I guess, mail fraud by surreptitiously shipping you something through the U.S. mails, or I got to just hand deliver it or something.
There you go.
But I won't forget. But I guess this bet may cancel that out, because then you're going to owe me a bottle of tequila, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see. Okay.
We'll see.
So let's get to the good stuff. Let's get to the mitigation. So, so here, this is a printout from Jason, and we've discussed Jason, the judicial.
We got a podcast on that too.
Yep. We have a podcast on that. So I ran it for Jason for offense level 43, criminal history 1, under 2B1.1. Where the defendants did not receive a 5K, which is a motion for downward departure for substantial assistance. And as we can see here, there were 29 of these defendants matching the sentencing profile over the last 5 fiscal years. And the average sentence, the average sentence was only 195 months, which is a hell of a lot better than 110 years. Yeah. And the median sentence was only 156 months. Now, what at sentencing stats, what we do is we actually take this data and provide better graphics and show what that range is, because 195 months, that doesn't mean everybody got 195 months. And really what you need to show judges is where those sentences fell around that 195 months. Were they mostly between like 180 and 200 months? Or did you have some sentences that were down like around 60 months and some way up high, like 300 months? That can really make a difference in how you present and what you argue to a court, and what a court's going to impose. Because again, as we know, one of the axioms of the sentencing guidelines is to treat similarly situated offenders similarly. So at any rate, the 195 months was the average, 156 months was the median sentence. Fully 77%, over 3/4 of these defendants, even though it's not a big number, 29, nonetheless, 3/4 of them are about 25 of them received a sentence below the guideline range, whatever their applicable guideline range was here. And remember, all their guideline ranges are going to be the statutory maximum for their particular case. So it could be 1,000 years, it could be a couple hundred years, it could be 60, 20 years, whatever it is. And so, these statutory maxima are going to be all different and all over the place. But whatever it was, everybody was maxed out, and almost nobody received that, which is a good thing for Samuel Bankman Fried, or I should say 77% of them didn't receive that. But here's some better information.
Yeah.
So one of the things too is what I like to do is not just even look at those who are similarly situated, but those who are not similarly situated, because there's a danger of unwarranted disparity, but there's also a danger of unwarranted parity, where you're giving a very serious sentence that's the equivalent of what somebody who committed a very serious offense got. And of this particular offense, nobody died, nobody was sexually assaulted, no children were sexually trafficked or anything like that. This was just a straight up financial crime. And there's no allegation that I'm aware of that people were left destitute or on the street as a result of this financial crime. Just financial institutions lost money, investors lost money, et cetera. And that's serious, but not as serious as, say, murder. And murder here, that for those in criminal history category 1, the average was 258 months, and the median was 221 months, which is that's a lot less than 110 years. So the point being is
it's less than 20 years, right?
Right. It's the average, the mean for murder is 258 months, which is 21 years and 6 months, 21 years and 6 months. So at any rate, that really should be the cap. If I'm going into court and I'm arguing sentences like, judge, I mean, seriously, anything even approaching 20 years is ridiculous, because that's what people are getting for murder. And then sexual abuse, the same thing. 198 months is the average. The median was 180 months. And this is a very big data set here. There was 1,006 individuals over the last 5 years that were sentenced federally for a sexual abuse offense. And then finally, let's just look at fraud. So other types of fraud. What's the typical sentence for fraud overall for those with no to little criminal history, like Sam Bankman Fried? Well, the typical sentence is only 19 months, and the median is 10. And there was almost 4,000 of these individuals sentenced for fraud over the last 5 fiscal years. So the guidelines are telling the judge, sentence this guy to literally orders of magnitude above what others generally get for fraud offenses. And even if we look here, what this table is, this is from the federal sentencing statistics, the source book for federal sentencing statistics that the Sentencing Commission pulls out or publishes every year. And by the way, sentencing stats, we have the same data, the exact same data that the commission pulls all these numbers from. We use this to analyze and get a little bit more sophisticated than the commission does here in our analysis. At any rate, if you look over here on the very right-hand side to criminal history category 6, which are your recidivists, your career offenders, the most serious of serious offenders. I mean, you can see that for fraud, the average sentence is only 35 months and the median is 30 months. So, if Sam Bankman Fried was to get, let's say, somewhere around the average sentence for those that are similarly situated to him, which is 195 months, that's like sentencing somebody. That's equivalent. That's more than the median sentence for sexual abuse in criminal history category 3. So, I mean, the point is, even those sentences, those might be what other people have received, and those might be somewhat typical. But even those that might be similarly situated are still getting absurdly high sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, these are economic offenders. And just because everybody else got too high of a sentence, Your Honor, doesn't mean that you should commit the same abuse of discretion here and give him, such a high sentence. So let's look at a few other things here. And here's some other issues that are going to help him, or other data, let me say, that will help Sam Bankman Fried. And this is from the latest quarterly report on sentencing statistics from the commission. And what this shows is that the frequency of downward variances overall, this is under all types of guidelines, whether it's murder, fraud, drug trafficking, child pornography, what have you. The rate of downward variances is almost at a record high. It's very close to the equivalent that it jumped to at the beginning of the pandemic. You can see here in the middle of the chart, this trend chart that we're looking at, around the middle of fiscal year 2020, we can see that the downward variances all across the board started to jump high. That's when the pandemic began, and they have stayed high since then. And what's really interesting is even though the pandemic's not over, but the emergency is over, and certainly the number of cases have gone down, but the courts are still sentencing pretty much it seems that the courts across the board have readjusted their sentencing practice in light of the pandemic and haven't changed. They've kept it there, which is good. I think it's a good thing as a policy. It's good to reduce the overcrowded Bureau of Prisons, and it's also good for defendants, especially those who are non-recidivist defendants like Sam Bankman Fried. And by the way, I just want to go back to one quick thing that's going to also help Sam Bankman Fried in that what it appears to be that silly Zippo, the 0-point offender that I believe he's eligible for. As you and I have also discussed.
Did you say silly? Silly?
Well, silly. No, excuse me. The 0-point offender isn't silly. I just meant it's silly. No. It's
because I think our name for it is pretty fucking cool.
I love the name for it. That's good. Yeah,
Zippo.
I just use it automatically all the time. The Zippo. I don't think it's silly. What I mean is, it's almost it's almost trivial with respect to, or academic. It's an academic application.
When you're at a level 55.
We're at a level 53, 55. Once you're over 43, if you get that. By the way, this some people might think, well, why did Sam Bankman Fried just plead guilty? This is one of those rare cases where pleading guilty won't help him. In terms of the sentencing guidelines, it certainly may have helped him with respect to sentencing, but it doesn't help him with respect to the sentencing guidelines because that downward adjustment of 3 levels for acceptance doesn't matter.
He's the guidelines are the guidelines, and they're not gonna plead away $8 billion. Yeah.
So let me get back to the Zippo. So this is why I think the Zippo is material and can help him, because it now comes with a new ground for a downward departure. And what the commission says is courts should consider a downward departure now for all those who have committed the Zippo or who are eligible for the Zippo and who didn't commit a crime of violence. And this is going to be the kicker here, or the rub, or the catch, I guess is the better word.
There's always a catch.
The one catch is that the commission said, courts should consider a downward departure for those eligible for the Zippo where the crime is a nonviolent crime and not otherwise serious. They don't define otherwise serious, and perhaps a lot of this mitigation can make it not so serious, because whenever we're weighing a crime, the way the commission or the guidelines work is it weighs not just the offense seriousness, but the offender's culpability. And perhaps if his culpability is less, it kind of makes it not so serious.
2 points to that. One is they won't present the mitigation, so that's out the window. And B, or I guess 2, it's hard for me to wrap my head around how an $8 billion fraud is ever going to be considered anything other than serious by
here we go.
Especially because, listen, we haven't touched upon this one thing, but we talk about it in our last Zippo podcast when we talk about Simonelli and the fraud statute and how the court doesn't like us shoehorning, every crime into federal wire fraud. Well, this is another quintessential example of that, because cryptocurrency is a whole new thing, and they're using 100-year-old statutes to try to regulate a 21st century creation that it looks like the banking industry, but is not the banking industry. And it's a whole Wild West. And the federal government is freaking out because they don't know how to regulate.
You're stealing my thunder.
Oh, and we didn't even talk about this. This is we're like mind meld. Okay, what's your thunder?
Okay. Boom. So I got two more slides one more slide before we get to it. So the last slide, in terms of sentencing statistics that can help him, is also just looking at 2B 1.1. So first of all, what this chart shows, this trend chart that I have up on the screen, again, shows that the rate of downward variances are up. are up quite a bit. They're above about 36, 37% of all defendants are now getting sentenced below the guidelines across the board. And they have stayed up since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, let's look specifically at 2B 1.1, which will be his sentencing guideline. There, what the statistics show, and I wrote it there in my crappy handwriting, 43%, is that last year or last quarter. So this is the most current data available. Last quarter, 1,590 of 3,701 fraud offenders or offenders sentenced under 2B 1.1 received a downward variance. That's greater than the overall average, which was just around 36, 37%. Okay. 43% of fraud offenders across the board are getting downward variances. So that's very promising for Bankman Fried. And even though I don't show this here in this podcast, trust me when I tell you that the data show that as the offense level goes up in fraud cases, the rate of downward variances and the degree of downward variances increase significantly. And we could see this. That's borne out when you look at, again, Jason, where it shows that the average sentence is only 195 months, when almost, without a doubt, the minimum maximum sentence is going to be around 20 years. And many of these sentences, or the guideline sentence, is going to be about 20 years. And many of them are going to be much, much higher than that, like Sam Bankman-Fried's, which is going to be 110 years. Okay, so now let's get to true mitigation. And this has nothing to do with his autism or anything. This goes to the nature of the offense itself and some mitigation that I do hope, and I'm sure that his counsel will take into consideration, and it will take expert testimony. But I think it's an important story, not only to tell for this case and to this judge, but I think it's an important story to tell to the public too, about the nature of cryptocurrency. So, and this is kind of hinted at here, and there's a clue to it actually in the indictment itself. And if you look on, see what page of this is it? It's page 5 of the indictment, paragraph 10. This really jumped out at me when I read it. It says, in or about June 2022, the cryptocurrency markets experienced a downturn. That should clue in everybody. Why is that relevant? What does that have to do with anything? Because you have to look at the loss that was caused by FTX. You have to look, let me put it this. You have to look at what caused the loss that FTX suffered. Was it just Bankman Fried's actions, or were there external factors out in the marketplace? And boy, oh boy, a lot of external factors. So I went on and I just looked at Bitcoin for if you excuse the French, shits and giggles. But you can see it was around November 7th of last year, November 7th of 2022. I think that was around that time that the shit had already hit the fan, and the fan, and Bankman Fried is trying. If you look at just the months preceding that, the cryptocurrency market wasn't just experiencing a downturn, it was tanking. And this is just looking at Bitcoin. Sam Bankman-Fried had nothing to do with that. Nothing. And FTX had nothing to do with that. That's just the nature of the market that was just tanking. And that's a significant contributing factor, I believe. It can be shown as a significant contributing factor to everybody starting to get nervous and wanting their money out, and doing a run on the bank. Yeah. And I also looked at this crypto index that NASDAQ publishes. And it's the same thing here. As you can see, in the months leading up to FTX's demise, that index was already going down significantly. And none of that has anything to do with FTX. So the point simply is, these are external factors that are causing a lot of the loss. But
this all roads lead back to autism spectrum disorder, because what the government will say is, everyone got nervous because crypto tanked, and they were caused a run, and they all wanted their money back, but FTX didn't have their money. And FTX had a responsibility to have their money. And so that's the fraud, that they should have kept their funds safe and secure and everything else.
Okay.
And
wait, you're right. You're right.
yes.
But how are they classifying the loss? If they, let's say they invested here at the peak in FTX, when the crypto market was around 4,000, are they going to claim that when FTX bottomed out, or in the crypto market bottomed out around 1,000, shortly after FTX's demise, that they lost that 3,000? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it goes to the degree of loss. Yes, FTX absolutely should have had their money, but the question is how much?
Mm-hmm. Well,
and how much did FTX lose? So if I'm investing, if I invest with FTX $1 million in early 2022, and that $1 million is now worth $100,000 before FTX implodes, and then FTX implodes and doesn't have my $100,000, whatever. That doesn't mean that FTX is responsible for a $900,000 loss.
Right.
And what's not clear,
they should be responsible for the loss of the value of the crypto at the time.
And so what's not clear to me is how the government is valuing this massive billion-dollar loss right now. And that's my point.
And that's a good point. And this is why
I make good points.
You do make good points. And are you sure you're not drinking over there? No,
I'm not.
That's my line. But here's the thing, and why we work so well together, because you're thinking this from a numbers perspective. I'm thinking about it from a story perspective in autism, which is when you put your money in a bank, they're saying you should have kept that money as safe and aside and access, and they would have get their money back immediately. If they wanted it back, that you should have had it to give them. Well, guess what? In traditional banking, that's not how life works. I deposit money in a bank. My money's not sitting in a bank. And if everybody makes a run on a bank because they're worried
about the money either,
bank fails.
Correct.
That's what happened here. And
that's exactly
the only difference is the bank is backed by FDIC and a federal. So if the bank fails,
but only to a certain degree, they're only $100,000. That's the maximum account is insured.
Well,
it's not
100%. What was the bank in Silicon Valley? Are they getting charged? That whole bank that collapsed? Are they? No, I'm asking.
I don't know.
It doesn't look like it. But this goes to my thing. Like, I think the autistic brain says, I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. Look at, first of all, there are no rules for crypto. That's the big problem. This is the Wild West. So the only thing we have to do is compare it to what we know, the traditional banking system. And so does that make him a nefarious criminal villain, crypto villain, because he decided he could take investors' money and do other things with it, just like banks do every single day?
Right.
That's not a fraudster. That's a person who's not exercising great judgment, but it's a whole different universe of culpability.
Right.
And that's a big problem. Anyway, go ahead.
No, and you're right on that. You're absolutely right, because crypto is not regulated. And I think that's the political angle.
It's the biggest problem here, because the government hates crypto because they can't regulate and they can't control it.
Well, they're going to try to paint Bankman Fried with a very bad brush.
Of course.
Especially when it comes with
what they're famous for.
Well, not with respect only to the loss of money, but all his political contributions, because they're going to try to say, and they already are, and it's in the indictment, that he was using a lot of this money to contribute to all politicians, Republicans and Democrats, and going up on the Hill and testifying to try to manipulate the law, literally manipulate the law, and that he was just doing this for nefarious purposes and all the stuff to try to cover his ass.
Right.
So anyway,
and I submit he's not that diabolical.
Right, and I agree. I don't think he's that diabolical.
And he's the guy who allegedly in Michael Lewis's book, who's supposedly trying to pay Trump $5 billion not to run again. And that's not.
That would have been a good investment.
I think it would. Well, probably. But the idea that Trump gets to walk away with $5 billion is sickening. But the point is, like, what's he trying to manipulate there? He's not. This is what we call effective altruism. He legitimately felt that this guy shouldn't be president. He had $1 gajillion and he thought, I'll just give this guy a few billion. Maybe he will go away.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not trying to manipulate it. I think if he really wanted
a favor,
if he really wanted to get a benefit for himself, it would be, I'm going to finance this guy so he can run again and pass all and spearhead all the regulations that are going to make me 1,000 times richer so I can do whatever the fuck I want with crypto.
Yeah.
He's not.
Yeah.
So
just the last thing here. So I think I made the point that hopefully they're looking at the what did the feds call this in the indictment? The market's experienced a downturn. We can't say that. That's a hell of an understatement. The markets were imploding. Within a matter of months, the crypto market reduced its value by 66%. But this was a paper published by the G20. The G20 of finance minister. It was a report submitted by the bank. What is this called? Let me move this thing here. The Bank for International Settlements to the G20 this past summer. And it's all about the very nature of crypto. And this is the big takeaways that the Bank of International Settlements reported to the G20, that the crypto ecosystem is subject to a high degree of fragmentation, is characterized by congestion, high fees, blah, blah, blah. I won't read all of this. It's their third point that I think is the most important here. And it goes to what they call structural flaws in the market itself. That crypto does not finance, cryptocurrency does not finance any activity in the real economy. And remember, that was the whole promise of crypto 15 years ago when Satoshi, this anonymous guy, published the first white paper about cryptocurrency. It was supposed to finance real activities or activities in the real economy, and it's never done that. But what it does do, according to this report, is amplify known risk, as growth is driven mainly by speculative influx of new users hoping for high returns. In other words, it's the whole cryptocurrency market is driven by greed, not the greed just of people like Sam Bankman-Fried, if we're going to even assume he's greedy, but it's by the very investors themselves. Everybody's in on this. They know it's speculative. They're just in on it for a quick buck. So at the end of the day, how much responsibility do the victims bear in this regard? Again, it's not, they know this isn't a traditional bank. It's not where you can invest your life savings and all this other stuff. And you would be silly. Nobody would advise anybody to invest their life savings in cryptocurrency market. It'd be like going to Vegas and trying to finance your retirement at the blackjack table. That's just silly and ludicrous. And then turning around and saying Vegas defrauded you. Right. I mean, that's really is somewhat of the argument here. Right. That I think that really needs to be focused at sentencing. If you're a responsible investor, you have A, done your research, and B, realize that, okay, whatever I'm going to invest in crypto, I need to be prepared to lose every fucking dime. And maybe I'll get rich. Who knows? But I need to go into this understanding that this is crazy crap and it could all go boom tomorrow. Right. And that's eyes wide open. Yeah. Right. And that's my point about the loss. Victims. How much all these external factors, when the cryptocurrency market itself it has inherent structural flaws with all these external factors that go into the value, and it's inherently speculative. It's just it's all fake money, fake investing. Everyone's just trying to make a fast buck. When it implodes like it did, how much responsibility does Sam Bankman-Fried bear on that? And I would argue that these billions that are the numbers of billions in loss and all that stuff, that's just for headlines. That's for selling newspapers. At the end of the day, I think he did very little to contribute to this loss. Really, at the end of the day, the loss was caused, I think, almost exclusively by external factors. Where he screwed up was trying to hide it all at the end. I think that's what he does bear responsibility for, but not for the implosion, and not necessarily, as you correctly pointed out, the run on the bank. which is what caused everybody to lose what little money they already had left as a result of the of everything imploding. That's my TED Talk.
I love it. I love it. There's so many layers and nuances here to this. I feel like we've been going a while. I think
I have one last point. Last point. Okay.
And then, I bet I know what it is. But then also, I hope we're going to do predictions.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I got mine.
Okay. So, life expectancy, as we always talk about this, it's always important. And even though that Sam Bankman-Fried is only in his early 30s or late 20s, he's 31. Excuse me, I have it right here. If I look at my own chart, he's 31.6 years old. When we talk about life expectancy, I always bring up the Evelyn Patterson study, and this is a study that was done 10 years ago, published in a peer-reviewed article in a peer-reviewed journal. And it was a study of the effect on life expectancy of imprisonment, long-term imprisonment on inmates. And it covered thousands of inmates. The study was quite comprehensive. And what Dr. Patterson found, according to her study, which, by the way, has been cited as persuasive authority in federal courts across the country, as well as several state Supreme Courts. So this is something to really take. It has some meat to it.
This is real.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's real. And it's also consistent with findings of the Department of Justice itself. But what she found is that on average, inmates will lose 2 years of their life expectancy for every year that they are imprisoned. Now, generally speaking, this doesn't really matter that much when you have a young offender, or a relatively young offender like Sam Bankman-Fried. Because most people aren't going to be looking at 110-year sentence. They may be looking at 5 or 6 years or something like that. And he has a long life expectancy. According to the Social Security Administration, as of now, Sam Bankman-Fried can expect to live on average to be 81.4 years old. That's what the predictive model for the Social Security Administration says. But so now taking that, and assuming he's going to lose 2 years of life expectancy for every year he's imprisoned, that guy, unfortunately, is only going to make it around 17 years. So any sentence approaching 17 years is going to be a de facto life sentence. And let's say maybe any sentence approaching 20 years, when you give into consideration the customary 15% off for good conduct time and any new FSA credits that he can earn.
Right.
But not, so I would say this: really any sentence imposed. Well, the better way of putting it is any sentence that results in actual time served of close to 17 years will be a de facto life sentence or a statistical life sentence for Sam Bankman-Fried. So that would be the hard cap. I would really push hard with the court, because there's no point in giving a super life sentence to Sam Bankman-Fried, or what I would call death by imprisonment for a first-time economic offender who is just participating in just, if you will, a group orgy of speculation. That's all this was.
Well, that was an interesting choice of words, given that he was living with like 10 people in his Bahamas and polyamorous, but we won't go there. But, and just to add to that, I think the reason why the life expectancy goes down is because of the harsh conditions of confinement. And I think it bears noting that people will say, well, he's not like he's going to a maximum security hardcore prison where the conditions of confinement are super bad. He'll be at a country club. He'll be playing golf, bleep, blop, bloop. And you and I know better than that, because we have clients who have gone to so-called camps. Yeah. And they've been a living nightmare because the BOP is in complete disarray. And I never miss an opportunity to call out the BOP because they're in complete chaos. They are understaffed, no health care, no psychological care, and most importantly, total fucking indifference to the needs of their inmates.
Yes.
And you can listen to any number of podcasts that we've done on the BOP to get a better sense of that. But I'm here to tell you that even if Sam Bankman-Fried, the white collar criminal, goes to a so-called camp, the conditions of confinement are going to be excruciating. And people need to understand that.
Right. But he won't be going to a camp. He will not. uh, because from what I recall, if he's going to get more than 10 years, he won't be camp eligible.
Yeah.
You're not camp eligible until you have 10 years or less to serve.
Okay. So he'll go to a medium or a low facility.
He'll go to a medium or a low, but even there, it's going to be hard for him because he may end up in the shoe for his own protection.
Yeah.
Because first of all, he's going to be extremely vulnerable to prison because of his autism. And also because
of his high profile,
high profile, and notoriety.
Yeah. And when people have money, they think you have money. They're going to extort you, and they're going to be like, call your mom and have them put money on my books. Oh, it's going to be bad.
It's going to be hell for him, and he will not serve regular time, and he certainly won't serve easy time. This is not going to be hard time. It's going to be hell time for him.
The good news is it seems like everyone's got a cell phone in prison now, so at least they'll be able to access the internet. And who knows, there may even be a VPN on one of those devices. I don't mean to joke. I feel terrible for this dude. Yeah. But okay, so I think the last part of what we have to do is predictions. Did you ever see Rocky 3? Because it's my all-time favorite of the Rockies.
Is that with that's with Mr.
Clubber
T.
Lang, Mr.
Clubber
T.
Lang. Yes.
And they said to Clubber Lang when they were doing the pre-fight interview with him, "Do you have any predictions for this fight?" And they put the microphone to him. Do you remember what he said?
I can't remember, but I know it's good.
He goes, "Predictions, pain." So what are your predictions?
My prediction is between 12 and 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's based upon all the data that I've given. And I think that's going to really sway the court and not really just his life expectancy, but also I think there's some significant culpability or mitigation here that will mitigate his culpability. And I think what could help him and what hopefully the trial strategy is to show what the cryptocurrency market is just a big gambling. And it's an orgy of speculation. That's all it is. And everybody knows it. And it's a get rich quick scheme. Everybody is in on the scam. And if they can sell that, to the jury, that's great. Then he'll be acquitted. But even if they can't, that will develop a good record for Sam Bankman-Fried for sentencing purposes. So 12 to 15 years. I'm going to stick in that range.
All right. So I feel like I'm a little scattered right now. I have many thoughts. One is if they, by some miracle, the lawyers acquit Sam Bankman-Fried, if they do the job and he gets acquitted, I'm going to send them a fruit basket or some tequila or something. I hats off to them. Yeah. And mostly I'm just fixated on the word orgy because you've used it 2 times now, and I'm distracted because it's just. Back to my unofficial pseudo sponsor of this podcast, Lágrimas del Valle. I'm crying tears in the valley for Sam Bankman-Fried. My prediction is 20 years. And here's why, Mark Allenbaugh.
Okay.
Because I know that the mitigation story will not be told effectively. And I'm talking about autism spectrum disorder. And because of this whole crypto villain stuff, you look at Elizabeth Holmes, she's going to sentencing saying, well, she really believed she was trying to make it good and she was faking it till she made it, but her intentions were always right and she did terrible things. And what did she get? Like 11 years. Mm-hmm. They are going to make an example because he's not her, and they hate crypto. The government hates crypto. They can't control crypto. And so when something like this happens, they're like a snarling, slobbering dog devouring a juicy bone. They are going to they're going to fuck him every which way but Sunday. And I think that the judge is probably going to buy into it, hook, line, and sinker, and say, this is a terrible thing. Crypto's a terrible thing. The whole world needs to see what happens when you do this kind of stuff. And he's going to get 20 years if he's lucky. That's what I think. And I'm sad as fuck to to say that. I'm terrible. I'm terribly sad. It makes me so sad. But that's what I think. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that you are.
All right.
I think I'm going to be. I mean, one thing I should add, though, that I forgot to mention is I think 12 to 15 years because he's also going to get hit with a hell of a fine. I may be wrong on that. No, you tequila, but I think he's going to be hit with maybe a record fine and disgorging all those assets. And I think his parents may have to cough up a lot of that money that may have gone to them too.
If they've got it. Well, that'll be interesting. I don't know, but let's I guess we're gonna have to do a post-mortem, a sentencing post-mortem when this is all said and done. But we'll see. I know this is gonna be a long episode, but I think it was really good and really important. And thanks, Lagrimas, and thanks, Mark Allenbaugh, and sentencingstats.com, 0pointoffender.com. If you're interested in a calculation about whether you qualify for a 0-point offender, and I don't know, DougPassonLaw.com, set for sentencing. I got a million .coms. I can go on and on and on, but they'll all be in the show notes. And that's it.
We should get speculationorgy.com.
Speculationorgy.com, because I'm pretty sure just orgy.com is probably taken.
Yeah.
Don't Google that. Don't Google orgy.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to see you, man. Have a good rest of your Sunday.
Okay. Good to see you too. Thanks, Doug.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it for today, but before we go, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to you, the listener, for spending time with us today getting set for sentencing. Whether you're a lawyer, someone who could use the help, or maybe you're just a true crime buff who loves the inside scoop on how this whole thing works, I am so glad you're here, and I hope you keep listening. If you're interested in knowing more about what I do, mitigation videos, case consults, live teaching, on-demand educational content, books, articles, all of it, please visit www.dougpassonlaw.com. I'm Doug Passon. Until next time, hang in there. Wait a minute, that's a stupid way to sign off on a podcast about sentencing. Hang in there. What's the matter with you, man? I guess they call that gallows humor. Sorry. All right. Well, I will see you next time on Set for Sentencing. Bye-bye.